There's a saying that those who complain don't matter, and those who matter don't complain. There's an element of truth in that, as hard as that may be to swallow. If you look around the internet, you'll find plenty of complaining groups. People complaining about the nature of life. And a classic example of that might be this guy called Emendum. His podcasts and videos seem very heartfelt, but all he does for literally over 1,000 podcasts now is complain about this thing called the Carnival of Carnage, which is life on this planet. And without a doubt, it's very cruel and seemingly futile. But to be complaining about that endlessly indicates a lack of power. Because that statement of those who complain do not matter is simply saying they have no power. Complaining is effectively some kind of substitute for gaining power. What kind of power? Well, I'll get onto that in a bit. There are two kinds of power. One is external, one is internal. But let me also talk about depression, because depression is also very often associated with a lack of power. The United Nations has recently published a report saying that we've got it all wrong about depression. It isn't primarily hormonal and chemical. Depression is very often caused by a sense of a lack of power. And so what do we see in the world today? We see power amassed ever more centrally by fewer and fewer people. Financial resources are held by fewer and fewer people, and the mass of people are less and less empowered. And let's not kid ourselves, money is a source of power. If you have no money, you cannot exist, you will die. So we see people in the world in a passive kind of state, playing with their smartphones or iPhones or whatever, their phones, playing games, watching soaps, watching game shows. Totally passive, no power whatsoever. And in many countries, particularly the United Kingdom, trades unions are a thing of the past. The people have no representation in their work, and they don't seem to mind. And so working conditions can deteriorate endlessly, and no one complains. But along with that comes an ever-increasing rate of depression and anxiety. These people are depressed and anxious because they have no power. Each one of us is born with a striving to persist in our existence, to continue existing, and with as much power as possible. Now the state ensures that we cannot over-exercise that power, to some extent anyway, because we have laws, and the laws say you cannot go and steal your neighbour's new high-definition large screen TV, or just steal his car, or rape his wife, or the other way around. And so we're protected to some extent from each other's power, but within the limits of the law, we can all exercise more power. What would happen if the world was filled with billions of self-realized people? And I'm not talking about self-realization as so-called spiritual folks talk about it. I'm talking about people realizing that they have a right to express their power, to exploit their abilities, to group together to look after each other's interests. What would the world, what would the governments do? What would the large corporations do with a world full of people who were self-actualized in that way, self-realized? Of course, it's in the interests of government and large corporations to keep us all stupid. Hence the declining standards in education. A smart population is not what the powers that be want. And so we have an increasingly stupid population. Anyway, just in case this starts to turn into a complaining session, let's talk about power. Actually, one little bit more complaining. One of the most disempowering things to hit Western societies particularly is the New Age movement. A movement that says that in order to achieve anything or acquire anything, to realize power, all we have to do is think about it. The powers that be must have been laughing their socks off when they realized people had bought that one. So all I have to do is think and it will manifest. Bullshit. Get off your fat lazy arse and go and do something. And all I have to do is meditate and I will be calm. You will not be calm by meditating. If you have no power, you will not be calm. You will become a complaining, insipid thing. So the New Age is, in fact there are people who suggest that the New Age was kind of brought in with the Beatles in the 1960s to subdue the population. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if it was that deliberate, but at the end of the day that has been the effect. And you have to remember that Buddhism was used in the East to subdue populations. I'm not saying that at the root of Buddhism there isn't truth, because I think there is, but the way it was used was to subdue populations. The same with religion in the West. So there are all these vested interests that are working to make sure that you do not have any power. So it's hardly surprising that many people are depressed, even suicidal, very anxious. So let's talk about the two kinds of power. One kind of power is outer power. This is the least satisfying kind, in actual fact. But we need some outer power. We need some. This is not an either-or situation. We need both. So we need enough power to be able to earn money for food, a reasonable way of living, to form effective social groups, all the kinds of things that the animal that we are fundamentally is satisfied. The animal has been doped with smartphones, New Age bullshit, a sense of people being made to feel like they're impotent, and so they're depressed. So people need a certain amount of power in the outside world. And in the Gurdjieff work, there was a rule. People would not be accepted into the Gurdjieff work unless they could show that they had enough power to deal with ordinary life. They didn't want complaining, hypnotized people in the Gurdjieff work. That always seemed harsh to me at the time, but now I see the sense of it. Because otherwise what you get is any one of a group or a person from any group, any of the number of groups. So for example, there's the misanthropists, and because they're misanthropists, then they dislike people. So there's a group of people who dislike people, and it just degenerates into them telling each other to fuck off. You know, there's only so far something like that can go. And that is a problem with complaining, because the problem with complaining is that it has a very shallow depth. You know, if you are a misanthropist, then basically once you've told everybody to fuck off, there's nowhere else to go. If you have power, then the upside is potentially as large as you want to make it. And that's a problem with being negative and, well, so-called being negative and being positive. So, yeah, lots of people complaining. So, outer power is the power to deal effectively in the world, and we do that better when we're together than when we're separated. But the powers that be have separated people very effectively. And there's a long riff I could go into about that, how the British government, for example, has targeted the ill and the weak as the source of everybody's problems, and then they targeted the immigrants as the source of everybody's problems. And because people generally feel less empowered, so they're looking for scapegoats. When times are hard, people look for scapegoats. And the ill and the unfortunate and the immigrants in Britain have been used as that scapegoat. Doesn't stop people being depressed and unhappy, but that's the way it works. Anyway, so there's outer power that we need to get all the ordinary stuff in life and to live a reasonably satisfying life. The other side of it is that we need inner power. And inner power is, in my opinion, the real cause of depression. People have lost the ability to express their own nature. They are happy to be hypnotized by their computer games or whatever's happening on TV or celebrity chat or whatever trivia they happen to pick up on. And because of this, they have no real inner power. How can someone have power if the most strenuous thing they do is pick up their favorite magazine to read about what Brad Pitt's doing or something? So this is all disempowering. We get power, inner power, through effort. And effort is so unpopular. People believe that they can develop some inner power by just meditating or, as I said earlier, wishing for something, or, you know, all the New Age claptrap that is so destructive. Inner power requires effort. Inner power for what? The power to be what you are. And there's a long digression I could go into there, but I'm not going to. But to be what you are, to a large extent, means that you express your natural desires as far as you can within the law. But most people are not even that empowered. So, they not only have no ability to apply themselves to something, but they are in their external environment, because they're so passive, being deprived more and more of the simple basics to live life in a reasonable way. So they're going to be depressed. So what is the solution to all of this? Well, there's two aspects to it, the outer and the inner. People need to get their act together and realize they need to be active and make efforts to ensure their life is as reasonable as it can be. Please do not think you can get what you need from life by thinking about it. You need to do something. Where the inner effort is concerned, you need to start trying to understand yourself and the world, and there is no shortage of information. Gurdjieff was once asked why his works were made so inaccessible. He said, they're not inaccessible. Anybody can get them. People don't want them. And there we are. There's the truth of it. It's too much effort. So, people have a choice. And I'll just say, if you want to understand the world, then read Spinoza, read Ernst Becker, read Swaran, read Schopenhauer. This is not pretty stuff, or much of it isn't pretty stuff. But the world isn't a pretty place, but get your own fucking power. Don't sit there quivering in a corner complaining about things. Understand how the world works and how you work, and through that understanding you will gain power. Anyway, so that's what needs to happen. It won't happen, of course, because all that will happen is most of the people who listen to this podcast will then just flip onto the next YouTube video somewhere about how you can visualize wealth and become wealthy. So there we go. The forces of life work against you. To acquire power for yourself is against life. Life does not want you to have power. It just wants you to be a blob in service of the powers that be in the outer life, and in the inner life just to be passive so you can be used by nature to have a fuck, create the next generation, and then you die. A decade or two after that. So that's the way it all works. Get off your fat lazy arse and do something. That's the solution to it.